Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm Missy and this is Rambling Rose Farmhouse. And today I'm going to talk to you about how to make a bin like this to raise worms in. So we decided last fall that we were going to go ahead and get worms. We had been talking about it for a while and we decided to go ahead and do it. So we just kind of gathered up some things that we already had, and we had to get a few things to go with it, but we made this worm bin. And it's April now, so we've managed to keep our worms alive all through the winter. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to show you how we made our bin for them to live in, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about like what you need to get them started, how to get started with worms, and kind of some things we've learned over the last few months with worms. So if you don't know, why would somebody want to have worms? It's to use the worm castings as fertilizer for your garden and things like that. The worm castings are one of the best things that you can use in your garden. So in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be trying to take my worms out of this container and put them in another one so that I can harvest the castings out of here and go ahead and use them for fertilizer. So I'll try to make a video of that too, so you can see that step. But right now I want to go ahead and show you how to make a worm bin. In case that's something that you want to do, this is the perfect time to go ahead and get started with raising worms. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you do, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel too. I'm going to go ahead and get started. All right, so the first thing we did was we got our containers and we drilled the holes. So we need some ventilation holes in the side. And in a minute, I'm going to show you what this drill bit looks like. But one name for it is called a uni bit, and it makes different size holes. And so we made 1-inch holes in the sides of our bin. And I'm going to show you, this ended up being kind of a family thing. We made 3 of these bins, one for me, one for my daughter-in-law, and one for my daughter. And we didn't do them all exactly the same. So I'm going to show you the differences in how we did those. But this was the first step, was getting these ventilation holes drilled in here. And it's not quite as easy as it looks. You can see mine are pretty crooked there. So you actually need some drain holes in the bottom. And I just kind of marked where I wanted mine to be and used a regular drill bit on those to do the holes. And I did quite a few of them. Now, I haven't ever had liquid drain out of my worm bin, so I'm not really sure that's a good thing. It doesn't seem to have hurt them any, but I haven't had any liquid drain out. So I'm not sure that I would do my bottom holes this way again. I think on the next bin that I make, I'm going to do bigger holes like my daughter did on hers, which you'll see that in just a minute. And she told me she does have liquid drain out of the bottom of hers. So the same thing here, ventilation holes in the top. So the top and the sides had ventilation holes, and then the bottom has drainage holes because you do want the liquid not to build up in there. You want it to be able to have some place to go. I think maybe I don't keep my worm bin as wet, maybe as other people do, but I didn't have drainage for mine. So we had to cover the holes with something, and this is the screen we used, which It feels like plasticky screen, but I think it's fiberglass. It's easy to cut, and I feel like it was safer for the worms than like a metal screen would have been. I think a metal screen with, you know, the cut edges would have been rough, and when they crawled over it, it probably would have, you know, cut their little bodies. So this is the screen we used, and it seems to have worked really well. So here I'm just cutting a piece that's the width and length it needs to be to go over those 3 holes in the side that we made for ventilation. And I can tell you, if you had holes like that and you didn't cover them, your worms would be crawling out of those holes. My worms crawl up the sides of my bin all the time, and they definitely would have gone through those holes. They even get up on the lid, which I'm going to show you in a little bit when I open it and show you the worms in there. So we use this glue to glue it down, and I tried to make sure that all of my edges were glued down good and that it was solid around the edge of the screen, because I didn't want them to be able to get up underneath that screen and get stuck in there. And I wasn't sure about using the glue in the bin, whether that would be harmful to them or not, but undoubtedly it's not, because we haven't had any problems with that. And mine crawl all over that screen all the time. And here we just picked up something that was in the shop, I'm not even sure what it was, to use to kind of press it down really good and make sure that the glue, you know, it kind of came up through the screen a little bit and got stuck really well on all those edges. And then we're just going to do the same thing on the other side to cover up those big holes. Now the holes that I have in the top of mine, you saw that a minute ago, like I said, my worms come up, they crawl up the sides of my bin all the time. They get all over the lid on the inside, but I've not had any crawl out of those little tiny holes. So I'm not really sure why they haven't tried to get out of those holes, but I do think for sure that they would have gone out these bigger holes on the sides. They go through stages kind of where they are trying to escape. I don't know if they're really trying to escape, but it looks like they're trying to escape. And then other times they're not really crawling on the sides and trying to escape at all. But I think if you put holes this big for your ventilation, you definitely need to cover them with the screen. There's Rachel, and she is going to do hers, and she is going to do hers a little bit different than mine. And so you can see there where I got the glue right along the edge, because like I said, I didn't want to skip any spots that those worms could get up underneath that screen and get all caught in there and stuff like that. So she used the big drill bit and made the 1-inch holes in the bottom of hers, and she told me that she gets a good bit of drainage out of hers. So I think that for my next one I make, I'm going to put the bigger holes in the bottom and just see how that works, compare it to the one I have now. I do think the one I have now worked fine. So we made 3 of these bins. Like I said, we got our worms in the fall, and we all have had success, and so far, good luck with our worms. We haven't had problems with them, and we've all kept them alive all winter long, so it's kind of been a good thing. We have bees too, and I can tell you, worms are a whole lot easier than bees because they don't sting you when you fool with them. So I think if you're, wanting to get something, trying to start something new that you have never done before, worms are a really good thing to do. They're easy, they're not expensive to keep. You just feed them your scraps, and you'll get some of what's considered to be the best fertilizer that you can use for your garden. So it's not, not that expensive to get started with them, and they are easy. Now, here in the South, it gets too hot for them here in the summer and too cold for them in the winter, so we have to keep them indoors. So all three of us have kept our worms inside, like I said, all winter, and it's not been a problem at all. And you really don't know they're there. They don't make noise, they don't smell bad, they're just in this box, and nobody even knows they're there. You really have to pay attention or you'll forget to feed them, because you'll just forget they're there. And here they're cutting their screen to do that there. Now, one of the things I wanted to tell you about, just kind of while you're watching them make their bins too, is you really, if you're going to do this, you need to make sure that you get worms, the right worms that are specifically made for this, because they're, they are different. They're not just like the regular earthworms that you dig up out of your yard. These worms, they digest or process the scraps and everything quicker, and so they're the kind you're supposed to get. Here she's putting the screen over her bottom holes too, which I think you definitely need to do if you put the bigger holes in the bottom, to keep the worms from going out through the bottom too, because they will, like I said, they will try to escape out of your box. And the thing is, if they get out, they die, because they can't just be out without being, in the moisture of the stuff in the bin and everything. They just dry out if they get out. So you don't really want them to get out. You want to keep them in there. Red wigglers, though, are the type of worm. I think there's a few other types, but those are the ones that we ended up getting. And you'll see those in a little while. But one thing that you need to be on the lookout for, and you need to be really careful about where you get your worms from. If you've never heard of Asian jumping worms, you need to look those up and research them, because they are an invasive type of worm that really depletes like your soil. It destroys your soil. They destroy your garden if they get in your garden. Like, they're just really bad. And I did read about them. You can get them in potting soil. You can get them in mulch. One way people get them is they use those worms a lot of times. They're what they sell for fishing bait. And so people will take, like if they have leftover worms, they'll throw them out in their garden or something, thinking that they're good for their garden. And they're really not. They're really bad. They're something that you don't want in your yard. So when you buy worms to start raising like this, make sure that you get them from a reputable place, and make sure that you get red wigglers, or forgot what the other names of the composting worms are, but make sure that that's what you get, and be really careful. Like, you should never throw your fishing worms out. You should never put worms from the yard or any place like that in your composting bin. You want to keep your worms, purely the composting type worms, and you really don't want to take any chances of getting those Asian jumping worms mixed in with your worms, or, like I said, in your garden or anything like that. So here you see this is my daughter-in-law Christy, and she's making hers pretty much, I think, the same way I did. Now, she did put the small holes in the bottom of hers, but she did say she gets some drainage out of hers too. So I'm thinking that I probably just keep mine maybe not quite as wet as they keep theirs. I don't know. You do have to, if the soil or it's not really soil that's in there. It's worm castings. But if it starts getting too dry, you do have to add a little bit of water. And I do use a spray bottle, and I just spray the top layer of mine, and it seems to work fine. It seems to have kept it moist enough. And then also when you feed scraps, if you feed wet, scraps to them, that also adds moisture to the soil. Or not soil, it adds moisture to the bin, I should say. So when we're finished putting these together, we will be adding the stuff in there to put the worms in. And what we ordered is some coconut blocks, which you'll see. Oh, look, there they are. You'll see the coconut blocks. And what you do with those, if you wet them, you soak them in water, and then they look like this. And that is what you fill your bin up with. So you would use these coconut blocks. There may be other things, I don't even know, because we researched and that's what we decided to do, was to use the coconut blocks. The coconut blocks, they can actually eat that, so it can be food for them. It can also be bedding for them. And so they eventually, if you filled this thing completely up with this coconut stuff, whatever it is, I don't even know what it is, they eventually would turn that whole thing into worm castings. But when we filled it up, and I don't know why I don't have video of that, we layered some cardboard in there with the coconut, and we also layered some shredded paper in there, and then kind of mixed it all together. And we ordered a large pack of worms, so we ordered 2,000 worms and divided it 3 ways. And the way we ended up doing that was to measure the whole thing, see how much it weighed total, and then we divided them up by weight, because we obviously couldn't count them out and divide them up by worms, so we divided them up by weight. And we all got plenty of worms in our bins from that. So 2,000 was enough for three worm bins. And see, there you can see some cardboard, some little pieces of cardboard in there. The kids had a whole lot of fun playing with the worms and putting them into the bins to start off with. And like I said, these are red wigglers. And it did not take them all, didn't take them long at all to start going down into the bottom of those bins. They don't like the sunlight. And so they really quickly started going down in there, being out in the sunlight. And that's another tip for you. If you do get worms, when you first get them, wherever you're going to keep them, leave the light on for several days during the night, because they will, like when it's dark, they will start going up, and they may find their way out of your container. And you do want to have a lid on it. You don't want to not have a lid on it, because they'll get out. And like I said, they'll die if they get out. If you don't find them, they'll dry up and they'll die pretty quick. So if you leave the light on, that will discourage them from going up and crawling out of your bin. So that's a good idea at first. And like I said, mine are crawlers. They try to escape all the time. Rachel said hers never do that. So I don't know what the difference is. What makes some do it and some not do it. And mine don't do it all the time. Just every once in a while they'll do that. So I think I've told you most of what I know about, worms and getting the environment ready for them. I'll try to leave links, like to these coconut blocks that we got and some things like that for you. Because I can't remember even what they were called right now at the moment, but I will find them and I'll link them in the description. And I am going to show you in a minute like how I finished off my bin as far as at the bottom and all, but I think this is pretty much, you see the idea of how to do it. Like I said, it's not hard, it's not really very expensive, and I think that they're easy to keep alive, so you can pretty much just keep this going once you get it done. Like I said earlier, I'm fixing to have to try to get my worms out, and so that I can get my castings out, but I don't want to throw my worms out. So I'm going to build another one so that I can move the worms to the new one and then be able to get the worm castings out of the old one without, throwing out my worms. I had hoped to do it before they started having babies, but I didn't. So my bin right now is full of tiny little worms. So I'm probably going to try to wait a few weeks until those get a little bit bigger, because I think it would be pretty much impossible to get all of those little tiny baby worms out of there. So you can see here they're already going down. They're not even on the surface anymore, hardly. Okay, so this is the container. This is just another container I had, and I used this on the bottom. So I sat my finished bin into this container to catch any liquid that may come out, because supposedly you would get a lot of liquid draining. And I put it up on bricks, so I don't know if you can see that, but there's bricks between the blue container and the clear plastic one. And then I also sat it on these furniture dollies, because I keep it kind of up in this little cubby hole in this room. And this way I can pull it out really easily when I want to feed them or check on them, look at them. And then when I'm done, I can just push them back into that little cubby. I had thought that I was going to build something with wheels on it like that, but I ended up finding these furniture dollies and they work good. So far, that's just what I'm using. And you can tell that I didn't go out and buy a new container to do this in. That's why the lid's so faded. We just used something that we had. Now, the reason it has dirt all over the top, like I said, is because my worms get up there and they crawl around, and they bring that dirt up there with them and they leave it. I'm not really sure how that happens, but it'll be totally clean, and then I go take the lid off of it again and it's full of dirt again. And this time I only found that one crawling around. I didn't find a whole lot, but sometimes when I pull the lid off, it's covered with worms. They're just everywhere. And then you have to be really careful to get them back in the bin and not drop them on the floor or anything like that. And see, mine does look a little dry right now. I'm going to have to go ahead and give it some water. But see, they get all up on these sides. That's up in the little part by the handle. They filled that up with dirt. They put dirt up all up the sides of the bin. They just, everywhere they go, they bring this dirt with them, and well, it's not dirt, actually. I guess it's worm castings, technically. But, yeah, that's why it looks so messy, because everywhere they go, they bring it with them, and they put it all over the place. So, I hope you learned something from this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. And subscribe to my channel if you want to see more content from me. And I just appreciate all of you who watch my videos and subscribe to my channel. And I hope to be back again next week with another video, and I hope to see you there.